She was just a black cleaning lady with an old, rusty key on her chain. They mocked her, humiliated her, called her worthless. What they didn't know, she was the sole heir to a hidden $50 million estate. By the end, jaws would drop, reputations would shatter, and justice would be served. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you think everyone deserves respect, smash that like button now. The grand hallway of the Whitmore estate gleamed under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers. The marble floors, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the opulent portraits of ancestors who had never known a day of real work. It was a place built on old money and new arrogance, a private event venue that catered to the whims of the wealthy. Evelyn Carter moved through this space like a silent shadow, her presence meant to be felt only in the absence of dust and disorder. In her 50s, she possessed a quiet grace that seemed out of place amidst the loud, performative luxury of the estate. Her movements were economical, her face a mask of calm professionalism. For years she had cleaned these halls, her rhythm steady and unchanging. But today, that rhythm was broken. As she bent to wipe a stray scuff mark from the base of a marble pedestal, the chain around her neck snagged on the corner of a gilded frame. The chain, usually tucked securely beneath her uniform, swung forward. From it, a single heavy iron key slipped loose and fell to the floor. The sound it made was not loud, but in the cavernous silence of the hall, it was sharp and distinct, a metallic clatter that echoed off the cold stone. Evelyn froze for a half-second, a flicker of something vulnerable in her eyes, before she reached for it. But she wasn't fast enough. Well, what do we have here?" A voice dripped with condescending amusement. Chloe Whitmore, the operations manager, stood with her arms crossed, a smirk already playing on her lips. She was in her mid-30s, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than Evelyn's monthly salary. Her entire being radiated a sense of entitlement, a belief that her position in this house was a birthright, not a job. She gestured toward the key with a perfectly manicured finger. "Dropping your treasures, Evelyn." Evelyn's hand hesitated just above the key. She wanted to snatch it up, to hide it away from Chloe's mocking gaze, but she was trapped in the spotlight of her boss's attention. Two other staff members, a young waiter and another cleaner, stopped their work, their eyes darting between Chloe and Evelyn. They knew this tone. It was the prelude to one of Chloe's casual cruelties. Chloe took a step closer, nudging the key with the pointed toe of her expensive shoe. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "My God, look at that thing. Is that a slave relic? Did they hand those out with the shackles?" The waiter snickered nervously. The other cleaner looked down, busying herself with a non-existent spot on a nearby window, but her tense shoulders betrayed her attention. The air grew thick with humiliation. Evelyn's face remained impassive, a lifetime of practice keeping her emotions locked down. But inside, a familiar fire burned in her chest. She slowly picked up the key, its cold, familiar weight a small comfort in her palm. The iron was dark and old, pitted with age, a stark contrast to the gleaming gold and polished silver that filled the rest of the estate. To Chloe, it was junk. To Evelyn, it was a promise. She clutched it to her chest, her knuckles white. She did not look at Chloe. She kept her head down, her gaze fixed on the marble floor. This was her defense mechanism, the shield of invisibility she wore every day. If she didn't engage, if she didn't react, the storm would eventually pass. Chloe, however, was not finished. She thrived on reactions, on seeing the flicker of pain in someone's eyes. Evelyn's silence only spurred her on. "Honestly, Evelyn, what is that piece of garbage? It's worthless. You shouldn't be carrying around junk like that in a place like this." It lowers the tone. She looked at the other staffers, her voice loud enough for them to hear clearly. "She probably thinks it opens a treasure chest." The mockery hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Dylan Brooks, a new intern in his early 20s, rounded the corner just in time to hear the last remark. He was carrying a stack of linen napkins, and he stopped dead in his tracks. He saw the scene. The powerful manager looming over the quiet maid, the other employees smirking or trying to disappear, and the profound look of contained sorrow on Evelyn's face as she clutched the old key. His stomach turned. He was new here, still learning the ropes. But he knew injustice when he saw it. He saw Chloe's smirk, the casual cruelty of it all. And a wave of anger and shame washed over him. Shame that he was standing there, silent, a part of the audience. Evelyn finally tucked the key back under her collar, the worn leather cord a familiar weight against her skin. Her hands were steady, betraying none of the tremor she felt inside. She had to endure. It was almost time. Just a few more days. Chloe, satisfied that she had made her point, gave a final, dismissive wave of her hand. Just stick to mopping floors, Evelyn. That's what you're good at. Don't trouble your simple mind with things you can't possibly understand. With a final triumphant glance at her small audience, she turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking an arrogant rhythm on the marble. The sound was sharp, brittle, and final. The other staffers quickly dispersed, melting back into their duties. The moment of theater was over. Evelyn remained still for a long moment, her head bowed. The hallway was silent again, but the stain of Chloe's words lingered. Dylan watched her, his heart aching. He wanted to say something, to offer a word of comfort, but the right words wouldn't come. He saw Evelyn take a slow, deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling. Then, with the same quiet grace as before, she picked up her cleaning cloth and turned back to the marble pedestal, as if nothing had happened. But Dylan had seen it. He had seen the mask slip. Just for a sec, and in that second, he saw the deep, quiet strength of a woman who was carrying far more than just an old iron key. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that he could not let this go. The gleam of the chandeliers seemed dimmer now, the opulence of the estate tainted by the ugliness he had just witnessed. The next day, the humiliation was no longer a private spectacle. It became a performance for an audience. A wealthy couple, potential clients looking to book the estate for their daughter's extravagant wedding, were being led on a tour by Chloe herself. She was in her element, her voice a smooth, confident melody, as she pointed out the Baroque architecture and priceless antiques. Evelyn was in the grand ballroom, polishing the enormous mahogany dining table that could seat 50. She worked methodically, her mind focused on the circular motions of her cloth, a small act of meditation in a place that offered her no peace. Chloe led the clients into the ballroom, her voice never faltering. And this, of course, is our grand ballroom. The acoustics are simply divine, and as you can see, the space can be configured for any style of event. She smiled, a perfect plastic smile. Then her eyes landed on Evelyn. A cruel opportunity presented itself, and Chloe, ever the opportunist, seized it without a second thought. She wanted to demonstrate her total command of the estate, and to her that meant demonstrating her command over its staff. She stopped beside the table, interrupting her own sales pitch. "Excuse me for a moment," she said to the couple, her tone suggesting she was dealing with a minor, amusing inconvenience. She turned to Evelyn, her voice suddenly louder, laced with a familiar cutting tone. "Evelyn, be a dear and fetch the sample menus from the service pantry, would you?" It was a simple request, but the way she said it was designed to belittle. Evelyn nodded quietly and began to walk toward the exit. But Chloe wasn't done. She raised her voice, just enough for the clients to hear clearly. "And try not to get lost. The words are big, but the pictures should help." She turned back to the clients with a conspiratorial wink. "You have to be so literal with the help sometimes. I'm not even sure she can read a menu, let alone afford anything on it." The clients, a man and woman in their late 60s dressed in quiet luxury, shifted uncomfortably. They exchanged a brief uneasy glance. They were here to see a beautiful venue, not to witness the casual degradation of a staff member. The man offered a tight, polite laugh, a social reflex to smooth over the awkwardness. The woman simply stared at a portrait on the wall, her expression strained. Their discomfort was a flimsy shield too weak to deflect the ugliness of the moment. They were buyers, not moral crusaders. They would not speak up. Evelyn stopped at the doorway. She could feel the client's eyes on her back, feel the weight of their silent complicity. Chloe's words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her eyes began to water, a hot, stinging sensation that she fought to control. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. She kept her back to the room, giving herself a moment to compose herself, to push the hurt down into the deep well where she kept all the other slights and insults. She imagined her father's voice, calm and steady, telling her to be strong, to remember the promise. Dylan, who had been tasked with setting up a sample table arrangement in the corner of the ballroom, witnessed the entire exchange. His hands, which had been carefully folding a napkin into a perfect swan, stilled. He looked from Chloe's smug, triumphant face to Evelyn's rigid back. His heart pounded with a helpless rage. He caught Evelyn's gaze for a fleeting moment as she turned to leave. In her eyes, he saw not anger, but a profound and bottomless sorrow. He tried to convey everything he was feeling with his own expression, an apology, outrage, a promise of solidarity. He didn't know if she saw it, or if it made any difference at all. She simply gave a nearly imperceptible nod and disappeared through the doorway. Chloe, meanwhile, felt a surge of victory. She had successfully put on a show of power. She had demonstrated that she was in charge, that every person and every object in this estate was under her control. She had put the help in their place, reinforcing the unspoken hierarchy that she held so dear. She turned back to the clients, her smile wider than before, completely oblivious to the sour taste she had left in their mouths. Now, as I was saying, she continued, gesturing grandly around the room, the lighting can be adjusted to create any mood you desire. She was blind to the truth. She saw Evelyn as a simple, uneducated maid, a cog in the machine that she managed. She mocked the old key on Evelyn's chain, seeing it as trash. She had no idea that the quiet woman she had just humiliated in front of strangers could buy and sell this entire estate 100 times over. She had no idea that the key she called a slave relic was, in fact, the key to the kingdom. In her arrogance, Chloe believed she was the queen of this castle. She was about to learn that she was nothing more than a temporary guest, and her eviction notice was long overdue. Evelyn returned minutes later with the menus, her face a perfect mask of neutrality. She handed them to Chloe without a word and retreated to her work, the silent, invisible maid once more. But something had shifted. The countdown had begun. That evening, far from the cold grandeur of the Whitmore estate, Evelyn was home. Her apartment was small but immaculate, filled not with expensive objects, but with memories. The air smelled of lemon polish and old books. Here she was not a shadow. She was not the help. She was Evelyn Carter, daughter of Thomas Carter, a man whose legacy was a secret whispered only in the quiet of this room. She walked over to a heavy oak bookshelf and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was dark with age, the wood worn smooth by the touch of hands across generations. She placed it on her small kitchen table and opened it. The hinges creaked softly, a familiar sound that was like a sigh from the past. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were a stack of letters tied with a simple ribbon and a photograph of a smiling, handsome black man, her father, Thomas. She carefully untied the ribbon and picked up the top letter. The paper was brittle, the ink faded to a soft brown, but she knew the words by heart. His handwriting was elegant, precise, the script of a man who was far more than the world had allowed him to be. "My dearest Evelyn," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the weight of our family's truth now rests on your shoulders. Do not be afraid. You were born strong because you had to be." Evelyn traced the words with her finger, the memories flooding back. Thomas Carter had been a brilliant businessman, a man with a mind for numbers and a heart for his community. In an era of rampant segregation and brutal injustice, he had amassed a small fortune through shrewd, secret investments. His greatest and most dangerous acquisition was the Whitmore estate. He had purchased it outright through a series of anonymous holding companies, a ghost owner hiding in plain sight. He knew that if his ownership were ever discovered, a black man owning such a prominent piece of local history, his life and the lives of his family would be in grave danger. So he devised a plan. He hired the Whitmore family, a respectable white family, who had fallen on hard times, to act as caretakers and public-facing managers. He paid them generously to live there, to maintain the property, and to present themselves to the world as its owners. It was a perfect cover. The Whitmores, grateful for the lifeline, agreed to the strange but lucrative arrangement. They never met the true owner. All instructions came through a lawyer, a trusted confidant named Mr. Gaines. Another letter explained the rest. The Whitmores are caretakers. Evelyn, nothing more. They are living in our house. But the world is not yet ready to know this. I have set up a legal trust. The estate will remain under the management of the lawyer's office until your 55th birthday. On that day, and not a day sooner, the final clause will mature. The ownership will transfer directly and irrevocably to you. It will be yours, in name and in fact. All you must do is wait. And so she had waited. After her father passed, the original Mr. Whitmore also passed away, and his children and grandchildren took over. They were a different breed. They had grown up in the mansion, surrounded by its wealth, and the story of being caretakers was forgotten, twisted into a family legend that they were the rightful inheritors. Chloe was the worst of them. She wore the estate like a stolen crown, her arrogance born of a lie she believed to be true. Evelyn picked up the old iron key from beside the box. It lay heavy in her palm. It had been her father's personal key, the one that opened his private study in the heart of the estate, a room the Whitmores had long since sealed off, believing it to be structurally unsound. But Evelyn knew the truth, another secret her father had left for her. The key didn't just open a dusty room, it opened a hidden safe within that room, a vault where the original hard copy of the title deed was stored, along with all the legal documents proving Thomas Carter's ownership. It was the ultimate proof, the final word. Her 55th birthday was in 3 days. 3 more days of mopping floors in a house she owned. 3 more days of enduring Chloe's sneers, of being treated as less than human. She had stayed silent all these years, just as her father had instructed. It had been a long, painful road, a test of patience and fortitude she never thought she could endure. But the end was in sight. She looked at her father's smiling face in the photograph. He had been a hidden giant, a king who ruled from the shadows. Now it was her turn to step into the light. The secret she carried was a heavy burden, but it was also a suit of armor. Chloe Whitmore thought she was mocking a poor, simple maid. In reality, she was taunting the woman who held her entire world in the palm of her hand. The question Evelyn asked herself every night was a simple one. Why? Why endure it? Why walk into that house day after day, year after year, and allow herself to be diminished, to be chipped away by the casual cruelty of people like Chloe Whitmore? The answer was as complex as the legal documents locked away in her father's safe. It was a tapestry woven from fear, promise, and strategy. She sat in her quiet apartment, the letters spread before her like a map of her life. The primary reason was fear, not for herself, but for her father's legacy. He had warned her in his final letter, the moment they suspect the truth, they will act. They will try to liquidate the assets, sell the land, break it up into pieces and run with the money. They have lived as owners for so long, they will feel entitled to it. A quiet mouse in the walls is no threat, but a lion at the door will make them desperate. Evelyn had seen the greed in the eyes of Chloe's father, and she saw it tenfold in Chloe. They had a taste for luxury now, an addiction to the status the estate gave them. If she had shown her hand even a day too soon before the legal protection of the trust was absolute, she knew her father's prediction would come true. They would have launched a legal battle, burying her in paperwork and court fees she couldn't afford. They would have bled the estate dry, selling off antiques, firing loyal staff, and mortgaging the property to its breaking point. By the time she could prove her ownership, there might be nothing left but a mountain of debt and an empty shell. So she chose the path of the quiet mouse. She became a cleaner, an invisible presence. It was the perfect disguise. No one pays attention to the person scrubbing the floors. No one suspects the maid of holding the keys to the kingdom. The second reason was the promise. On his deathbed, her father's hand, frail and weak, had gripped hers. His voice was a rasp, but his eyes were clear. Promise me, Evelyn. Promise you will wait. Let the law be your sword and shield. Don't let anger make you act rashly. Our victory must be clean, absolute, and undeniable. Let them reveal their true character, so when the time comes, no one will doubt why this must be done. Promise me you'll see it through. She had promised, and for Evelyn Carter, a promise was as binding as any legal contract. It was a sacred vow. Every insult she swallowed, every time she bit her tongue until it bled, every morning she put on that uniform and walked into the house that was rightfully hers, she was keeping that promise. It was an act of devotion to the man who had sacrificed everything to build a future for her. Finally, there was strategy. Staying silent was not passive. It was an act of profound, calculated strength. It was a long game. By enduring, she was gathering evidence. Every sneer from Chloe, every dismissive comment, every act of public humiliation, It was all fuel for the fire that was to come. She was choosing dignity over petty revenge, knowing that the ultimate justice would be far more satisfying than any angry retort. She knew their arrogance was her greatest weapon. They underestimated her, and in their overconfidence, they would expose themselves for who they truly were. So she stayed. She polished their silver, cleaned their flaws, and listened to their insults. She watched them walk through her father's halls with the swagger of thieves who believe they've gotten away with the crime. She held on to her silence as a shield and her key as a promise. It was a lonely, painful vigil. But her father had taught her that true power wasn't about shouting the loudest. It was about knowing when to stay quiet and waiting for the perfect moment to speak the truth. That moment was almost here. Her silence was not weakness. It was the calm before the storm. Dylan Brooks couldn't sleep. The image of Evelyn's face in the ballroom, that brief flash of deep, soul-crushing sadness, was seared into his mind. He had taken the internship at the Whitmore estate because it looked good on a resume, a stepping stone into the world of hospitality management. He had expected to learn about logistics, client relations, and event planning. He had not expected a front-row seat to psychological abuse. The next day, he felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He was just an intern, a temporary fixture. Getting involved was risky. Chloe had the power to fire him in an instant, to tarnish his record before his career had even begun. The safe thing to do was to keep his head down, finish his term, and get a good reference. But the safe thing felt wrong. It felt like cowardice. His conscience was screaming at him, a loud, insistent voice that he could no longer ignore. He had to do something. He had to know he wasn't the kind of person who just stood by and watched. He found Evelyn in the late afternoon, in the quiet solitude of the estate's vast library. She was dusting the spines of leather-bound books, her movements as gentle and careful as ever. The room was peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Dylan's mind. He hovered in the doorway for a moment, his heart pounding. Then he took a deep breath and stepped inside. "Evelyn," he said softly, so as not to startle her. She turned, her expression calm but guarded. She recognized him as the young man from the ballroom, the one whose eyes had held a flicker of kindness. "Can I help you, Dylan?" she asked, her voice even. I just wanted to say what Miss Whitmore did yesterday and the day before. It was wrong," he stammered, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I'm sorry I just stood there and didn't say anything." Evelyn stopped her work. She looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, she saw the genuine distress in his young face, the sincerity in his eyes. For years, no one had ever acknowledged her pain. They had either participated in it or looked away. This young man was doing neither. He was looking right at her and seeing her as a person. A small, imperceptible crack appeared in her armor of indifference.
"Thank you, Dylan," she said.
And the words were heartfelt. "That means more than you know." He felt emboldened by her response. "That key," he said, his curiosity getting the better of him. "The one she was mocking. I know it's none of my business, but it seems important to you." Evelyn hesitated. Her first instinct, honed by years of self-preservation, was to shut down, to give a non-committal answer and end the conversation. But something about Dylan's earnest face made her reconsider. He wasn't mocking her. He was trying to understand. She decided to trust him. Just a little. To plant a small seed of the truth and see if it would grow. "It was my father's," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She touched the key through the fabric of her uniform. "It's been in our family for a very long time. It's more than they know. It's more important than anyone in this house could ever imagine." She looked him directly in the eye. "You'll understand soon." The way she said it sent a shiver down Dylan's spine. There was a weight to her words, a hidden depth that hinted at a much larger story. He didn't know what it meant, but he believed her. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he was on the right side of this story. "If you ever need anything," he said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "If she tries anything again, I want you to know that I'll have your back. I don't care if I'm just an intern, I'll speak up." A genuine, warm smile finally broke through Evelyn's composure. It was a small, beautiful thing that transformed her face, erasing years of weariness. In that moment, An unlikely alliance was forged in the dusty silence of the library. Dylan had made his choice. He would no longer be a silent bystander. His conscience was now Evelyn's shield, and though neither of them knew it yet, his courage was about to become the catalyst for a revolution. Dylan's promise was not just a fleeting sentiment, it was a call to action. He now saw the Whitmore estate not as a workplace, but as a battlefield of morality, and he had chosen his side. The next day he came to work with a new purpose. He kept his phone in his pocket, easily accessible. He shadowed Chloe's movements as much as he could without raising suspicion, waiting for her inevitable cruelty. He didn't have to wait long. He found her berating Evelyn in a service hallway for supposedly leaving a smudge on a crystal glass. The accusation was flimsy, a transparent excuse for another power trip. Chloe's voice was sharp, cutting. "Are you blind? Or just stupid? I've told you 1,000 times everything has to be perfect. Perfect. Is that too complex a concept for you to grasp?" Evelyn stood silent, her head bowed in that familiar heartbreaking posture of endurance. Dylan, hidden just around the corner, quickly and discreetly activated the voice recorder on his phone. He captured it all. Chloe's tirade, her demeaning questions, her final venomous remark. "I don't know why we keep you around. You are, without a doubt, the most useless employee I have ever had to manage." The recording was damning. It was cold, hard proof of the toxic environment Chloe cultivated. Dylan saved the file, a small digital weapon stored in his pocket, but he knew it wasn't enough. A recording could be dismissed as a disgruntled employee's complaint. He needed to find someone with real power, someone who could use this evidence effectively. He remembered Evelyn's words, "You'll understand soon." It was a puzzle, and he felt like he was missing a crucial piece. Then he remembered the name he'd heard whispered among the older staff, a name connected to the estate's long and mysterious history, Mr. Gaines. He found the law firm of Gaines & Associates in the phone book. It was an old, established firm in the city center. Taking a huge risk, Dylan used his lunch break to go there. He walked into the quiet, wood-paneled office, feeling like a child in a room full of adults. He asked to see Miss Gaines, saying it was about a matter concerning the Whitmore estate. He half expected to be turned away, but a kind-faced secretary led him to a large office at the end of the hall. Mr. Gaines was an elderly man, perhaps in his late 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. He sat behind a large mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of legal books. He listened patiently, without interruption, as Dylan nervously explained everything he had witnessed: the public humiliation, the constant mockery, Chloe's unchecked cruelty, and the quiet dignity with which Evelyn endured it all. Finally, Dylan took out his phone and played the recording. As Chloe's voice filled the quiet office, Mr. Gaines's expression hardened. The lines around his mouth tightened, and a look of profound anger settled in his eyes. When the recording finished, he was silent for a long moment. "I have been waiting for this," Mr. Gaines said, his voice a low, powerful rumble. "I have been waiting for someone on the inside to finally stand up and do the right thing." He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Dylan's. "Young man, you have done more than you know. Evelyn Carter is not just a maid. Her father, Thomas Carter, was my client and my dear friend. He was the true owner of that estate." The puzzle pieces clicked into place in Dylan's mind. The secret ownership, the waiting, the significance of the key. It all started to make sense. He was stunned, but also exhilarated. He was part of something huge. "Evelyn's 55th birthday is in 2 days," Mr. Gaines continued, his voice now filled with a strategic energy. "On that day, the final provisions of her father's trust take effect. She becomes the sole, undisputed legal owner of the entire $50 million property." Dylan's jaw dropped. $50 million. The woman Chloe had called worthless was one of the wealthiest people in the state. Chloe Whitmore and her family are living on borrowed time, and they don't even know it, Mr. Gaines said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Your recording, Dylan, is invaluable. It is the moral evidence we need to accompany the legal truth. It will ensure that when the truth comes out, there is no ambiguity about who the victims and who the villains are in this story." A plan began to form right there in that office. Mr. Gaines explained that the estate's board of trustees, who oversaw the financials from a distance, were scheduled for their annual review meeting on the day after Evelyn's birthday. It was the perfect stage for the final act. "We will let Miss Whitmore walk right into her own trap," Mr. Gaines declared, his eyes gleaming with the fire of long-delayed justice. "She will come to that meeting expecting praise. Instead, she will face a reckoning." Dylan left the lawyer's office feeling 10 feet tall. He was no longer just an intern. He was an agent of justice, a key player in a story of incredible significance. He had taken a risk, followed his conscience, and in doing so, had helped set in motion the wheels of a righteous revolution. He and Mr. Gaines were now co-conspirators, united in their cause. Together, they were about to bring down the curtain on Chloe Whitmore's reign of terror. Chloe Whitmore felt untouchable. The world, as far as she was concerned, was unfolding exactly as it should. The clients from the ballroom tour had called back, impressed by the estate, and in her mind by her firm, decisive management style. She had successfully navigated another week, keeping the staff in line and the veneer of perfection intact. Her superiority was not just a feeling to her, it was a fact, as solid and real as the marble floors she walked on. She saw Evelyn in the hallway and couldn't resist another jab. It was like a compulsion, a need to constantly reinforce her own status by diminishing someone else's. "Still clinging to that rusty piece of junk, I see," she said, gesturing to the chain around Evelyn's neck. "Some people are just too stupid to know their place. They hold on to trash and think it's treasure." Evelyn didn't respond. She just kept walking, her silence a blank wall that Chloe's insults bounced off of. This infuriated Chloe. She wanted a reaction, a tear, a flicker of anger, anything to prove she had an effect. Evelyn's quiet composure felt like a form of defiance. Later that day, Chloe saw Dylan talking to one of the gardeners. She strode over, her expression impatient. "Dylan, I need the quarterly expense reports cross-referenced by Friday. Stop wasting time fraternizing with the grounds crew." She looked him up and down, a dismissive sneer on her face. She had noticed his discomfort during her confrontations with Evelyn, and she interpreted it as weakness. "You need to develop a thicker skin if you want to make it in this business. Sympathy is a liability." She saw him as a naive, soft-hearted boy. The idea that he, just an intern, could be a threat was laughable. He was a temporary gnat, an insignificant presence in her grand world. Her arrogance was a blindfold. She couldn't see the alliance forming right under her nose. She couldn't see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. She was so convinced of her own power that she was completely unaware of the hidden trap being laid for her. The upcoming board review was, in Chloe's mind, her coronation. She was certain she was going to be commended for her management, for keeping the estate profitable and prestigious. She had already decided that this meeting would be the perfect opportunity to finally get rid of Evelyn. Firing the incompetent maid in front of the board would be a power move, a demonstration of her commitment to excellence, and her refusal to tolerate anything less than perfection. It would seal her reputation as a formidable leader, and she hoped, lead to a significant raise and an even more powerful title. She saw the future laid out before her, a golden path of success and acclaim. She was the star of this show, the queen in her castle. Every move she made was, in her eyes, a step toward greater glory. She was completely, utterly, and blissfully unaware that she was walking toward a cliff, her own self-importance the wind at her back, pushing her closer and closer to the edge. The trap was set, the players were in position, and Chloe Whitmore, in her unchecked arrogance, was about to step right into it. The plan to oust Evelyn became Chloe's singular focus, an obsession that she polished with the same care Evelyn used on the estate's silver. She needed an ally, a confidant to affirm her brilliance and share in the delicious anticipation of Evelyn's downfall. She found one in Madison, the manager of a sister venue, a woman as shallow and ambitious as Chloe herself. They met for lunch at a trendy, overpriced restaurant where they could see and be seen. "You won't believe the deadweight I'm still carrying at the estate," Chloe began, swirling a glass of Chardonnay. "This old maid, Evelyn. She's been there since the dawn of time, I think. She shuffles around like a ghost, and honestly, her presence is just depressing." Madison leaned in, her eyes gleaming with manufactured interest. "The one you told me about? The one with the weird old key?" "The very one," Chloe exclaimed, laughing as if it were the funniest joke in the world. "She clutches it like it's the crown jewels. It's pathetic, really. A trash key for a trash person." The words flowed so easily from her lips, coated in the venom of her own insecurity. She needed to believe Evelyn was worthless to feel her own worth. "So what are you going to do?" Madison asked, taking a delicate bite of her salad. "I've got it all planned," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The annual board review is on Thursday. I'm going to make my case then. I'll frame it as a strategic move to enhance the brand's image. I'll talk about efficiency, modernizing the staff, and eliminating redundancies. All the corporate buzzwords they love." "Brilliant," Madison breathed, her admiration genuine. She recognized and respected the cold, calculated nature of the plan. "And for the grand finale," Chloe continued, her smile widening, "I'll bring up Evelyn directly. I'll mention her incompetence, her attitude problem, which is what I'll call her infuriating silence, and I'll recommend her immediate termination. Doing it in front of the board shows I'm not afraid to make the tough decisions. It'll practically guarantee my promotion." She felt a thrill just thinking about it. The image was so clear in her mind, the stuffy boardroom, the stern faces of the board members, all of them impressed by her ruthless efficiency. And the best part would be the look on Evelyn's face when she was summoned and then summarily dismissed, publicly humiliated, stripped of her job, and cast out of the estate she had haunted for so long. It was more than just firing an employee, it was an execution of her authority, a final, definitive victory. "She'll be out on the street by lunchtime," Chloe said with a satisfied sigh. "The old maid with her trash key, gone for good." Madison raised her glass. "To you, Chloe, to your promotion. You deserve it." They clinked their glasses together, a toast to their own perceived superiority. Chloe's confidence was at its absolute peak. She had a plan, an ally, and a target. She had considered every angle, every detail, except for one. She had never once considered that the quiet old maid she so casually despised might have a plan of her own. She was plotting Evelyn's downfall, meticulously designing a moment of humiliation, completely unaware that she was, in fact, scripting her own. The trap wasn't just set, Chloe was now helping to build its walls, ensuring her own inescapable ruin. The night before the board meeting was still and quiet. A sliver of moon hung in the dark sky, casting a pale light over the city. Inside her small, warm apartment, Evelyn Carter was a picture of calm. There were no frantic preparations, no nervous pacing. There was only a deep, settled resolve. The years of waiting, of enduring, of holding her tongue, had all led to this single moment. It was time. She sat at her kitchen table, the old wooden box open before her. She didn't need to read the letters again. Their words were inscribed on her heart. Beside the box lay the old iron key, its dark metal absorbing the soft light from the lamp. It seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a silent testament to the promise it held. Her hands were perfectly steady as she picked up her simple telephone. She dialed a number she had known for decades, a number that connected her to her past and her future. The phone rang twice before it was answered. "Gaines," a familiar, steady voice, said on the other end. Evelyn took a slow breath. She looked at her father's photograph, at his kind, determined eyes. She was not just doing this for herself, she was doing it for him, for every silent sacrifice he had made. "Mr. Gaines," she said, her voice clear and even, without a trace of the emotion that swelled in her chest. "It's Evelyn Carter." There was a pause on the other end, not of surprise, but of profound, respectful attention. He had been waiting for this call for a very long time. "Evelyn," he replied, his tone filled with a quiet reverence. "I know." She didn't need to explain. He knew what day it was. He knew that the final clause had matured, that the legal chains had fallen away. The ownership of the Whitmore estate had settled, quietly and irrevocably, onto her shoulders. The silent maid was now the master of the house. There was only one thing left to say. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. "It's time," she said. A single, powerful beat of silence passed between them, an acknowledgement of the gravity of the moment. Then, Mr. Gaines's voice came back, firm and filled with the strength of a righteous purpose. "Tomorrow, Evelyn," he said. "Tomorrow we end this." And that was all. She gently placed the receiver back in its cradle. The quiet call was over. A single phone call that had taken over 50 years to make. A single phone call that would shatter a dynasty of lies and change everything, Evelyn looked out her window at the sleeping city. A sense of peace, deep and profound, settled over her. The storm was coming, but she was not afraid. She was the storm. Chloe Whitmore arrived at the boardroom on the 10th floor of the corporate building downtown, feeling like a conquering hero. She had dressed for the occasion in a sharp crimson power suit, a color that screamed confidence and authority. She carried a leather portfolio containing her meticulously prepared notes, a script for the performance she was about to give. She expected to walk in, deliver her report, announce her strategic decision to fire Evelyn, and be met with a round of applause and a discussion about her bright future with the company. She pushed open the heavy oak doors, a polished smile already fixed on her face. The smile faltered. The scene was not what she had expected. The long mahogany table was already occupied. At the head sat Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the board, a man whose stern expression rarely changed. The other board members were there, their faces unreadable and grim. But they were not alone. To the chairman's right sat Mr. Gaines, the old family lawyer she hadn't seen in years. His presence was a surprise, a dissonant note in her carefully composed symphony. And next to him, looking calm and composed in a simple, neat suit, was Dylan Brooks. The air in the room was thick with a tense, expectant silence. It was not the comfortable, pre-meeting chatter she had anticipated. It felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. All eyes turned to her as she entered. There were no welcoming smiles, no friendly nods. There was only a cold, unified stare. Chloe's confidence wavered, but her arrogance quickly reasserted itself. They were probably just being serious because it was a formal review. And what was the intern doing here? Perhaps he was here to take notes. She refused to let their strange mood unsettle her. She was in control. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice a little brighter than she intended. "Mr. Henderson, I'm glad we could all make it." Mr. Henderson did not return the greeting. He simply gestured to the single empty chair at the far end of the table, opposite him. It was a clear, deliberate placement, isolating her from the rest of the group. "Ms. Whitmore, please have a seat. We have a great deal to discuss." Chloe walked the long length of the room, her heels clicking loudly in the unnerving silence. She sat, placing her portfolio on the table in front of her. She still clung to her script, to her plan. She would begin with the financial overview, then move to her proposal for staff restructuring. She cleared her throat, ready to launch into her speech, to take command of the room. "As you'll see in my report," she began, but Mr. Henderson held up a hand, cutting her off before she could even open the portfolio. "We will not be hearing your report today, Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice flat and cold. "The agenda has been changed. Mr. Gaines has the floor." Chloe's jaw tightened. Confusion and anger began to bubble up inside her. The lawyer. What could he possibly have to say that was more important than her operational review? She looked at Mr. Gaines, then shot a venomous glare at Dylan. What was going on? The feeling of control was slipping through her fingers like sand. She was no longer the director of this play. She was just an actress on a stage, and she had no idea what her lines were. The trap she had so carefully prepared for Evelyn was beginning to feel claustrophobic, as if its walls were closing in not on her victim but on her. The trap sprung with the quiet, deliberate rustle of old paper. Mr. Gaines, his expression a mask of grim professionalism, opened a worn leather briefcase and produced a stack of documents. They were yellowed with age, filled with the elegant script of a bygone era. He slid a copy down the polished table to each board member. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Gaines began, his voice resonating with an authority that silenced the room. "For over 50 years, this board has overseen the trust of the Whitmore estate under the belief that the Whitmore family were the beneficial owners pending certain legal maturities. I am here today to correct that foundational error." Chloe's heart began to pound. "Error? What are you talking about? My family has owned that estate for generations. It's a matter of public record." Mr. Gaines ignored her, his attention fixed on the board. "These documents, the original articles of the trust established by my late client, Mr. Thomas Carter, prove otherwise. The Whitmore family were never the owners. They were hired caretakers, salaried employees, tasked with maintaining the property until the true heir came of age and the trust reached its final maturity date. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the board members as they stared at the documents in their hands. They saw the name, Thomas Carter, and the clear, undeniable legal language. Chloe's face went pale. This is absurd. A lie. My grandfather would have. Your grandfather agreed to the terms in full, Mr. Gaines cut in sharply. He was grateful for the position, a position your family has since abused. He then nodded toward Dylan. And on the matter of that abuse, we have a more recent piece of evidence. Dylan felt a surge of adrenaline. This was his moment. With a steady hand, he placed his phone on the table and pressed play. Chloe's voice, sharp and cruel, filled the boardroom. Are you blind or just stupid? I don't know why we keep you around. You are, without a doubt, the most useless employee I have ever had to manage. The recording played on, a raw and ugly testament to her character. Chloe's face, already pale, turned a mottled shade of red and white. She tried to speak, to interrupt the damning evidence of her own voice. That's taken out of context. She was incompetent. This is a setup. Please be silent, Miss Whitmore. The chairman, Mr. Henderson, commanded. His voice was like ice. The last vestiges of respect he had for her had evaporated. When the recording finished, a heavy, disgusted silence settled over the room. Mr. Gaines let the weight of the moment sink in before delivering the final crushing blow. The maid Chloe Whitmore was speaking to, the woman she has systematically humiliated for years, is named Evelyn Carter, he announced. She is the daughter and sole heir of the estate's true owner, Thomas Carter. Yesterday was her 55th birthday. As of midnight last night, the trust has matured. The estate, and all its assets, valued at over $50 million, now belong, legally and entirely, to her. The heir was sucked out of the room. Board members stared, mouths agape. They looked from the legal documents to Chloe's horrified face, the truth dawning on them in a sickening wave. Mr. Gaines reached back into his briefcase and produced one final item. He placed it on the table with a soft, metallic thud. It was a single, heavy, old iron key. Ms. Whitmore often mocked this key, he said, his voice laced with contempt. She called it a slave relic and a piece of worthless junk. In reality, this is the master key to a vault in the estate's original study, a vault which contains the original, notarized deed to the entire property. The ultimate proof of ownership. The key she saw as trash is in fact the key to the very kingdom she thought she ruled. Chloe stared at the key as if it were a venomous snake. The key she had ridiculed, the symbol of Evelyn's supposed poverty and worthlessness, was now the symbol of her own utter and complete destruction. The trap had not just sprung, it had snapped shut with the force of an industrial press, crushing her career, her reputation, and her entire world of lies. As if on cue, the heavy doors to the boardroom swung open. The timing was perfect, theatrical and utterly devastating. Every head in the room turned. There, standing in the doorway, was Evelyn Carter. But this was not the Evelyn they knew. She was not in her drab maid's uniform, her shoulders stooped with the weight of her work. She was dressed in an elegant, tailored navy blue suit that spoke of quiet power and unshakable confidence. Her hair was styled, her posture was perfect, and her face, once a mask of weary endurance, was now calm, composed, and in complete command. She did not look like a maid who had wandered into the wrong room. She looked like she owned the building. A collective gasp went through the room. The board members, who had only ever seen her as part of the scenery, now stared at her as if seeing a ghost. Dylan felt a surge of pride so intense it almost brought tears to his eyes. This was the woman he had defended, the hidden giant now revealed. But the most dramatic reaction came from Chloe. The color drained completely from her face, leaving it a sickly, chalky white. Her mouth fell open. A silent scream of disbelief caught in her throat. The pen she had been clutching, the one she intended to use to sign Evelyn's termination papers, slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the polished table. Her mind simply could not process what her eyes were seeing. The world had turned upside down. The floor had given way beneath her feet. Evelyn walked slowly into the room, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces around the table. She walked with a grace and authority that felt more natural to her than the shuffling subservience she had feigned for years. She came to a stop not at the far end of the table but at its head, standing beside the chairman. She was taking her rightful place. Her eyes finally settled on Chloe. There was no hatred in her gaze, no vengeful fire. There was something far more damning, a cool, quiet pity. She let the silence stretch, forcing Chloe to sit in the wreckage of her own making. Then Evelyn spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it filled the room with its clarity and strength. It was the voice of a woman who had found her power. "Hello, Chloe," she said, the words simple and direct. "You are sitting in my chair." She let that sink in. Then she delivered the final blow, a statement of fact that shattered the last remnants of Chloe's reality. "For years you have treated me as less than human. You have mocked me, you have insulted me, and you have tried to break my spirit," Evelyn said, her voice even and steady. "All that time, you were a guest in my home. All that time, I was the owner you disrespected. As of today, your employment here and your residency at my estate are terminated." The words hit Chloe with the force of a physical impact. She flinched, her body trembling. The carefully constructed world of arrogance and entitlement she had built around herself had not just cracked, it had been pulverized into dust. The maid she had tried to fire had just fired her. The woman she called worthless now owned everything she had ever cared about. The jaws around the room had not just dropped. They had hit the floor. The grand reveal was complete, and it was more stunning, more absolute, and more just than anyone could have possibly imagined. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Chloe sat frozen, her face a mask of utter shock and disbelief. The blood had returned to her face in ugly, blotchy patches. She opened and closed her mouth, but no sound came out. The reality was too immense, too devastating to comprehend. Mr. Henderson, the chairman, found his voice first. He looked at Chloe with undisguised contempt. "Chloe Whitmore," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "As per the directive of the estate's new legal owner, you are fired, effective immediately. Your access to all company accounts has been revoked. You will be escorted from the building. Security will accompany you to the estate to retrieve your personal belongings, and you will vacate the premises within the hour." The finality of it all finally broke through Chloe's stupor. Her arrogance, her lifeblood, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a desperate, panicked fear. "No," she whispered, the word thin and reedy. "Please, Evelyn, I didn't know." She turned her pleading eyes to Evelyn, the woman she had tormented just yesterday. It was a pathetic, last-ditch appeal for a mercy she had never shown. Evelyn looked back at her, her expression unchanging. She did not gloat, she did not smile. She simply held her ground, a silent testament to the consequences of Chloe's own actions. She had been given countless opportunities to show basic human decency, and had failed every single time. There was nothing left to say. 2 security guards entered the room, their presence a silent, looming finality. They moved to stand on either side of Chloe's chair. The public humiliation she had so carefully planned for Evelyn was now her own, magnified 1,000 times over. Chloe began to sob, ugly, gasping sounds of a spoiled child who had finally had her favorite toy taken away. "I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry," she begged, her words dissolving into incoherent blubbering. But it was too late for apologies. The time for sorrow had long passed. The guards gently but firmly took her by the arms and lifted her to her feet. She was escorted out of the boardroom, her cries echoing down the hallway until the heavy doors swung shut, cutting off the sound and sealing her fate. The room was left in a stunned silence, the ripples of shock, regret, and disbelief washing over everyone. The other board members looked at Evelyn with a new, profound respect, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. They had been complicit in their ignorance, and they knew it. Evelyn then turned her attention to Dylan. She walked over to where he was sitting, his heart still pounding in his chest. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Dylan," she said, her voice now warm and filled with genuine gratitude. She made sure to speak loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear. "You showed courage when no one else would. You risked your position to do what was right. That is the mark of a true leader." She looked at the board members. "Effective immediately, I am promoting Dylan Brooks to the position of assistant manager of the Whitmore estate. He will be my right hand in restoring this house to one of dignity and respect." Dylan was speechless. He could only nod, his eyes wide with gratitude and shock. He had acted out of conscience, never expecting a reward. The power shift was absolute. Evelyn Carter, the once invisible maid, now stood as the undisputed authority in the room. The public consequences had been delivered, not with shouting or anger, but with a quiet, decisive justice that was far more powerful. The reign of arrogance was over. A new era had begun. Evelyn did not waste a moment. She walked the halls of the estate that afternoon, no longer as a shadow, but as its master. The staff, who had heard the news in a flurry of shocked whispers, watched her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. They had all been witnesses to Chloe's cruelty, and many had been silent accomplices. But Evelyn's first acts as owner were not of retribution, but of restoration. She called a meeting of the entire staff in the grand ballroom, the very room where she had been so cruelly humiliated. She stood before them, a figure of quiet strength. "For a long time this house has been managed with fear," she began, her voice steady and clear. "That ends today. This estate was built as a home, and it will be run as one with respect, dignity, and appreciation for every single person who works here." She immediately announced a 10% raise for all non-managerial staff, a reward for their hard work, and a clear signal that their contributions were valued. A wave of relieved gasps and applause filled the room. She then looked to the older staff members, the ones who had been there for years, who had shown her small, quiet kindnesses when they could. She promoted the loyal head groundskeeper to head of maintenance, and the long-serving head chef to director of culinary services, giving them the recognition they had long been denied. Her next act was to call the estate's financial controller. With Dylan and Mr. Gaines by her side, she instructed them to freeze every account and credit card Chloe had ever used. "I want a full audit of the last 5 years, she commanded. "Every expense, every transaction, any funds that were misused will be reclaimed." She was not just cleaning house, she was cleansing it of the corruption that had taken root. She walked through the halls, with Dylan beside her. He was no longer a nervous intern, but a confident young manager, energized by purpose. "I want to reopen my father's study," she told him, pulling the old iron key from her pocket. "That will be our new office, the heart of the new Whitmore estate." The transformation was breathtaking. The once dismissed maid now walked the halls as its owner. The fearful whispers of the staff turned into conversations of hope and excitement. A new energy buzzed through the mansion, an energy of positive change and restored dignity. Evelyn Carter was not just the new boss. She was the estate's salvation. She had endured the darkness, and now she was bringing the light. In the end, the story of the Whitmore estate became a legend whispered in the halls of power and the kitchens of the service industry alike. It was a story about a quiet black maid who carried an old, rusty key on a chain. They had all laughed at her, they had mocked her, humiliated her, and called her worthless, believing their power was absolute and her silence was weakness. They forgot that every key has a story, and some keys don't just open doors, they unlock destinies. In mocking the symbol of her past, they had sealed their own future. They learned a hard lesson that day, that a person's worth is not determined by their uniform or their bank account, but by the contents of their character. They learned that respect is priceless, and arrogance always costs. Evelyn stood on the grand balcony of her home, the old iron key now resting in a place of honor on her desk inside. She looked out over the sprawling green lawns, the ancient trees, the entire $50 million kingdom that was her birthright. The setting sun cast a warm golden glow over everything, and for the first time in a very long time she felt a profound sense of peace. Her father's promise had been kept, justice had been served, and as a gentle breeze whispered through the trees, it seemed to carry a single timeless truth. Dignity is the one possession that can never be taken away, and it is the only one that truly matters. Evelyn Carter, the hidden giant, finally smiled. She was home. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.